I'm Heather Fleming, founder of In Purpose Educational Services and author of the book, My Black Friend Says.
And I'm Delaney Ray, the coordinator of the LEAP Institute. So what do we do now, Heather?
Same thing we've always done, Delaney. Keep fighting for an equitable world.
This time in a podcast.
Welcome to the Listen, Learn, Love podcast, where comfortable friends chat about uncomfortable topics.
Let's do it.
Hey, Delaney.
Hey, Heather.
So, Delaney, as you know, because we've already talked today several times, I'm really upset about what happened yesterday at the Capitol building in D.C., and so are you.
Upset
and so,
isn't quite strong enough.
It's not. Like, seething rage would be approaching it a little. And so I just thought it would be a really good idea for us to actually talk about it and for people to see how we kind of process it. So, of course, yesterday we had a group of people who believe themselves to be patriots, basically commit treason and insurrection and sedition because they wanted to stop our democratic procedure for the peaceful transfer of power. And so they went into the Capitol building, they broke out windows, they, attacked people, and it just was a really bad moment in America. Like one day.
They stole items, they stole fixtures, they stole people's mail, they went into private offices, made it into the inter chambers.
Oh my goodness. And I just can't begin to express how that made me feel watching that happen. And it, as we're talking about this, one of the things that I really want to stress is we're not addressing politics right now. And I don't want to address politics right now. Wherever you stand on the political spectrum, I'm not going to comment on that. But we have to address the equity issues.
We have to address the equity issues that were so just boldly blaring at us yesterday in how this situation was handled versus other situations that we've seen. And I almost hate to even use the term protest in what happened yesterday.
Yeah, it was insurrection. It was a riot. And
Heather, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You and your family were in Washington, D.C. not too long ago.
Yes.
Do you want to tell me a little bit about why you were there and your experiences as a Black family and what you saw? Because I haven't been in Washington, D.C. since I was 16 years old. Don't do any math, but that's approximately 30 years ago.
So when we went for the August 28th March on Washington, which Reverend Al Sharpton, announced at George Floyd's funeral. And we went because we knew it was going to be a historic moment that we had to be there for. And so we took two of our kids. Our third child had to work. He's my adult baby, and he had to work. So we took the youngest two with us. And when we got there, it was a wonderful celebration, but there was lots of, procedure to go through. I don't want to say celebration. I think that's the wrong word. It was a wonderful day of speeches and cohesion and togetherness and shared purpose. But we saw lots of police officers that were running around and that were very visible as we were going through. And, that was fine. Like I said, it was an awesome and amazing day. And I will always cherish that time that we have in DC. But, one of the things that we noticed as we were walking to the area where they were holding the ceremonies or the events is that every single building that we passed was boarded up. So they were still open. The businesses were still open, but they were all boarded up. There were police patrolling. It was a different feel than what I saw yesterday. What I saw yesterday was just, and I can't help but to think if that had been Black Lives Matter protesters or anyone else, how would it have gone differently? And so then that brings to mind scenes like, we live here in St. Louis. We were here for Ferguson. And we saw people that were peaceful protesters being mistreated. And we still see it, when we have protests going on where the police automatically come out in riot gear. They are prepared with rubber bullets and tear gas. And in Ferguson, there was tanks. Why do you need tanks?
Here in St. Louis, we have seen ministers that were standing peacefully arm in arm brought to the ground by the law enforcement for just standing in the street, basically.
Exactly.
On Native grounds in the United States, we have seen Native Americans shot in the face with rubber bullets, hit with water cannons because of standing their ground on their own land.
On their own land.
And yesterday, I watched painfully, it felt like hours, although I don't know how long it was, screaming at the TV, where is the National Guard? When Black Lives Matter came to Washington, D.C., the National Guard was lined around the buildings, lines on the steps.
Yeah, the one picture, they were like shoulder to shoulder in front of the Lincoln Memorial.
Correct. When
people were simply saying, hey, could you stop shooting people who look like us indiscriminately? It's amazing. And the thing is that I'm here, I'm not on Parlay or any of the conservative social media platforms, but even I knew that they were planning on violence.
People have been sharing the comments made on that website and others by Proud Boys and, others involved in this movement. For weeks now, I have seen shared social media comments about what was happening. People were there in T-shirts that they had made for this event. If we knew about this event, the powers that be that have the authority to call in the armed forces knew about this event.
But the more, this morning I watched a press conference by Muriel Bowser, the mayor of DC, and she explained that because they were in a federal building, it didn't fall under her jurisdiction. So it was federal. There were federal officers that they tried to call in, and it was denied initially. And so there's just a lot of questions that have to be answered about why these people were able to get so far. So the purpose of this podcast was simply for us to talk about a big concept that we saw in play yesterday, and that was white privilege.
White privilege.
Now, I know that, friends of ours have posted about white privilege and received a lot of pushback. And so the first thing I wanted to start with is to talk about what it is.
Yes, Heather. What is white privilege? Does that mean that life is just easy and handed to white people without struggle or sacrifice? Is that what white privilege means?
That is not what it means at all.
I knew that, but I thought it was a good question to ask.
White privilege, according to Oxford Languages, this is their definition, it's inherent advantages possessed by a white person on the basis of their race in a society characterized by racial inequality and injustice. To kind of explain, we have to think about the fact the first African slave was brought to America in 1619. So right now, we are at 401 years of Africans being in America as lesser than and experiencing America as lesser than. And so, no, white privilege does not mean your life is easy. But what it does mean is that your life has not been made harder as a result of your skin color. So you have people, they will still struggle. White people will still struggle, but one thing they won't struggle with is worrying like I do. Like yesterday, my son wanted to go to his friend's house in St. Charles, which is a suburb of St. Louis. And I was worried for him I told him, if your car breaks down, do not get out the car and ask for help. Call Cody, have him come pick you up, call your dad and me so that we can come look at the car. Because I feared, after everything that was going on, that other people who shared that mentality, and I've seen across social media where lots of people were like, yes, we support them. That other people who share that mentality would not be kind to my son.
Or would feel empowered. When you watch people that look like you have the ability to break into one of the most important buildings of our nation during one of the most important events of our process of electing our national leader, when you see them able to do that with no immediate consequences. Now, this doesn't mean they're not going to face consequences. And I think many people on all sides of this realize that they're going to face consequences, but no immediate consequences. That's empowering. When young men who look like your son have been killed for playing with toys or for reaching for a wallet or carrying a cell phone.
And I think that is the most important distinction. So what we saw yesterday was white privilege at play. The fact that so many people had the opportunity to go in, ransack the building, and then leave. Like, for instance, they showed a scene where several of the individuals were down on the floor, zip-tied, etc. Those individuals weren't arrested. They were allowed to leave. When I personally know, we look at Cori Bush, who just was sworn into the House of Representatives 3 years ago. She's had the experience of going to a peaceful protest, being kettled, a police tactic for enclosing people, and then going to jail.
Absolutely.
When they hadn't broken any laws. So why is it that people that were able to break into our house, the people's house, for the purpose of insurrection while destroying property, etc., why were they allowed to just simply go? I'll never forget when the Stockley protests came up. They had buses out there waiting just in case people got arrested so that they could arrest people wholesale, load them into buses and take them to jail. You know why? So what is the difference? The difference is white privilege. They weren't prepared for this because they did not see these people as a threat. Now, across TV, etc., they're having this discussion and they're asking this question, but the reality is they already know why. They already know why.
I had an acquaintance today bring up to me the fact that a white woman was shot and killed in the Capitol building. So does that prove that there's no white privilege?
No, because look what she had to do. They were breaking a window. They were trying to force their way in. And when you look at the officer, they were doing everything that they could to stop it. And then they finally shot. And she happened to be the one that was in the pathway of that bullet. But when you compare that to Jacob Blake, who stopped to break up a fight, and police came and somehow directed their attention to him, and then one officer was allowed to shoot him 7 times in the back when he did not have a weapon in hand. All he was trying to do was to go about his business. He had not done anything criminal. So this woman was shot after committing a felony, after breaking into our Capitol. And then on top of that, when directed by police, continue to try to fight. Now, the thing to be clear of is that I don't want that woman's life. I didn't want that woman's life ended. You know, none of that. And that's the whole thing about the Black Lives Matter movement. The argument is that no one's life needs to be ended if we provide our officers with, number one, proper training, and then number two, with consequences if they fail to follow that training.
There should have been much more presence of police in place, knowing that this group of people was going to descend upon the Capitol building. There should be much less presence in places where we know in advance that it is truly a peaceful protest for Black Lives Matter planned. Across the board, there should be something that looks like equality.
Yeah, that's it. And, yesterday to me proves that if police want to de-escalate a situation, they can without loss of life. They were so determined not to shoot and kill an individual that they allowed them to come into the Capitol building. They opened the doors. And so I think that again just shows this idea that you protect the lives that are important to you. And that's why we have to say that Black Lives Matter too. Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Black Lives Matter.
And so, and what was part of my anger is the fact that when I go to a Black Lives Matter protest, I am sincerely saying, hey, can my son make it home if they have a busted taillight? Can my son make it home if they get pulled over for speeding? That's what I'm asking. Can my daughter go outside and play with a Nerf gun and still make it back home? And yet yesterday, these people were giving so much grace. And for what purpose? The purpose was simply they were disappointed.
Absolutely.
They were disappointed that their person didn't win. I know that disappointment. We're still feeling the impacts of some of that disappointment from other elections. But to go this far and then to still be given so much grace, that is what Black Lives Matter is asking for. Can you give our sons and our daughters and our husbands and wives and parents, can you give them the same grace that you would if our skin was white?
Your oldest and my oldest aren't that different in size, I don't believe.
Right.
They both have kind of long hair. It is simply the difference in their skin tones of the chance that your son, your oldest, is going to get compared to my oldest if they get pulled over. If, heaven forbid, they make a poor decision and actually do get involved in some kind of a skirmish. Is your oldest son going to be given the same chance and the same grace as mine? He's not.
He's not.
That's what it's about. And it's not disappointment in an election. It's 400 years of watching this inequity hurt children and families that look like yours.
And then deciding not to do anything about it, or even more, to support people who have expressed that they want to reverse even the process and the progress that we've made, the process that we've used to get here. And one of the things that I had to fight against, our whole organization in Purpose Educational Services is built around equity work. So to have someone who says that equity work isn't good and to ban it across our government and across any contractors, et cetera, that work for the government, that's just, what do we do with that? Because we saw yesterday, this work still needs to be done. It's a lot of work that needs to be done, and everyone has a role. So when we get to the love part, what do we do about this? That was the biggest thing that I wanted people to say. Like, I know that people are probably feeling really like our democracy has been attacked. Our work has been attacked. It's been so shocking to see people that still support racism and xenophobia and, all the isms. But there's still things that you can do. And so I just wanted to go through that.
Because I think a lot of us have all the big emotions, and what we need are some actions to back up those emotions.
Exactly. And so this morning, even as we were talking, like that was kind of what I was thinking to myself, like, what do we do now? And so now that I've had time, I think the first thing to realize is that we're past the time now where we can spend time just on educating ourselves or just on working within our immediate family. So trying to raise our kids to be anti-racist. Those are all things that we should still be doing. All of us continuing to learn. In my book, My Black Friend Says, I actually make the argument that, hey, you're going to mess up. As long as you are trying and you're making an effort, you're going to mess up. So right now, if you feel like you don't know enough, the next thing to learn is how to apologize and then just start doing it, because we don't have time to waste. And we see that now. We're at an opportunity to make significant change. And so that's the reason why we don't have time to waste. And so just now, if you're like, I'm scared I'm going to make a mistake, go ahead, learn what it means to apologize to someone and then just start doing the work. So that's number one. Number two is that, find your role. I tell people all the time something that you actually said to me, Delaney, that was so profound. One day we were just chatting. You said, you know what, Heather? I don't like getting up in front of people. There's things that I just don't like doing. But if I can use what I do know to help you do what you need to do for this work,
Amen.
Then that's my role. And so that's just it. Like, what is your role? Katie is wonderful. What is her role? Her role is keeping us organized, keeping us together. And so just find out what your role is and do it. How do you take your talents? How do you take your power, your social capital, whatever it may be? How do you use that in order to support the cause of equity? Because now is the time to do it. So look at your skills, look at your talent, look at your ability, look at the people that you know, your resources. Who can you activate in order to support a cause? Who can you partner with? Those are all really important questions. And so the next thing that I really recommend is talking to family and friends. I know right now that the natural instinct is just to unfriend all these people. They disagree with me. They support someone that I feel doesn't share my values, or, you feel that they don't share your values. For some, you have to hang in there. Now, I always like to draw the line. If there's somebody that is bad for your mental health, someone that is just truly extremely toxic, then by all means, unfriend them. Okay? But those casual friends, one of the things you have to think about is that if you don't talk to them, then a person of color will have to deal with them. And unfortunately, they'll have to deal with their racism. I always tell this story. I have a friend who came with me to one of my talks, and the person that had hired me to do the talk comes in. She had equity training that particular day, and she was like, they changed the definition of racism. And I remember being like, well, what did they change it to? They say the racism now is prejudice plus power. But I had always learned that it was just when you are prejudiced against somebody that's not your race. And so she's talking about all of this, and she's like going through it, and I'm trying to answer her, and she didn't listen to me. Me, the person they had hired to come and talk about race. She didn't listen until my friend looked at her and said, I'm racist. And then Maggie began to explain, I have learned behaviors that I have to unlearn because I grew up in a racist society. I grew up, learning racist ideals. And so now I'm accepting the responsibility of that by saying I have to unlearn racism. And it was so amazing what she did in that situation. She used her social capital as a white woman in order to get the person to listen to me, because once she said what she said, she tossed it back to me, the person they had actually hired to teach them about racism.
The professional.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So it's just one of those things where Sometimes there are things that people who are steeped in this won't listen to from me because I'm a brown face. So they'll dismiss it as playing the race card. They'll dismiss it as, trying to be a victim. They'll dismiss it as all this stuff. So there are people that you can reach that I won't be able to reach, or that they can reach and I won't be able to reach. So that's where I want people to understand that's part of your work. You know that I say, and I think I said it in another podcast, you can go down into Black spaces and do this work. That's great. But the real work that needs to be done is in white spaces. The teaching that needs to be done is in white spaces. Because, and I've told you this before, white people suffer from racism. Black people suffer because of racism. So we need to go to the spaces where the racism is, where the racism is being nurtured. It's born, it's being nurtured, it's being encouraged, it's being added to. Those are the spaces to do the work. So, yeah, you need to talk to your family and your friends. And if they're just not a totally hopeless, lost cause, then you don't need to unfriend them. Because if you unfriend them, people of color that come into contact them will bear the brunt of that. Okay, so another thing is I want people to start thinking about their realms of influence. Where do you have influence? Is it in your job? Is it in your church or your synagogue? Is it in, or your temple? Where is your realm of influence? Is it in the public realm? Is it in a club that you're in?
It could be your neighborhood book club.
It could be your neighborhood book club. Okay. So look at those realms of influence and really say to yourself, what needs to change to make this more equitable? And then once you think about that, now it's time to start thinking in terms of, okay, what do I have direct influence over versus what do I need to partner with other people for versus what do I need to advocate change agents to do? Okay, it's out of my power to change, but I can advocate and talk to the people who do have the power to change it. Okay. If you think in those terms about what can be done, you can start the process of creating equity. And I don't want to fool people about the fact that there may not be social, there's not going to be any social consequences. There will be. There'll be pushback. There'll be people that disagree with you. There'll be people who are ready to launch you through a window. There'll be all of that stuff going on, but you still need to do it. You still need to do it. I believe that my equity work cost me the ability to promote. I have a friend whose equity work cost him the ability to coach. There may be consequences, but yesterday proves exactly why we need to start having the important conversations. Because if anyone had important conversations about equity and given them, here's actual history, here's actual what might have been different if they hadn't been fed lies. Mm-hmm. And then the final thing is, what organizations can you support that create change? So, of course, I always want to advocate for in-purpose educational services. Absolutely. We're here. We're doing the work. We have our LEAP Institute, which is our Leaders in Equity, Anti-Racism, and Parity Institute. You are the coordinator of. Yeah. And so you help that vision come to life. We're going to be training 22 people to be equity leaders within their realms of influence. I won't speak for you. I'm really, really proud of that program.
Oh, and so excited for it.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we have other groups that create change. The Anti-Defamation League, the, local Black Lives Matter programs. And so everyone can look in their area to say, what organizations are actually here that are in your area that are creating real change in their communities?
Some people get hung up on thinking it's their responsibility to start something new or to create something new. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is amplify the voices that are already doing this, the organizations that are already wheels on the road.
I am so glad that you said that, because yes, that is really important. And that's what I say when people contact me about how do I start my own nonprofit. That ends up being the first question I ask them. Is there a nonprofit that's already doing the work that you can lend your skills and talent to? I saw a post earlier today by an activist in the St. Louis area, and she made a comment about, white people stepping into Black spaces, and she's Hispanic herself. But she made the comment about, white people stepping into Black spaces, and the fact that some of the reasons why we can't get progress made in some locations, especially the St. Louis area, is because, number one, we do have the open racist, etc. But then the next thing is we have the white folks who only want to do so much work and don't listen to the voices of Black folks pretty much. And I was like, wow, this was a whole word. Why are we still suffering from these loops? And that's part of the reason why. I told her, I said, one of the biggest impediments in the work that I'm doing ends up being the white liberals, teaching them how to get out the way in certain parts. So if there's already an organization, especially a Black owned organization, that is doing the work, instead of trying to start your own organization to do the same thing, you lend your talents and your skills and your abilities and your resources to the organizations that already are. So I'm glad you said that. So yeah, Delaney, I wanted to have a moment to talk about it. I know we didn't get to ha-ha too much, but, at this moment is a very sober moment. And in the end, we've got to do better. We've got to do better. And we've got to realize there's so much work to do. But I just want you to know that I'm proud to be doing it with you.
No, Heather, I'm the one who's really proud to be able to work with you.
And Delaney, you know who else I'm proud of?
Who's that?
I'm proud of everyone who has been listening, has listened through these first few episodes. And I really appreciate the fact that they're open and they're willing to join us as we have more episodes. An audience, something to keep in mind. If you would like to ask a question or to leave a comment for us, you can email us at listenlearnlove@inpurposeea.com. That's inpurposeea.com. Also remember that if you join our Patreon, that you can have access to, number one, early episodes, number two, a lot of good perks, and then number three, we have a group that we will add you to so that you can engage in conversation with other people who are trying to do this work of anti-racism.
Yeah, that group is on Facebook. It's a pretty awesome group of people who have done training with us and people who support us on Patreon, for this podcast. And Heather and I are there too. We weigh in and we continue these conversations there. We would love to have you there with us and support us.
And we'd like to thank the individuals who have already signed up. That's really cool, Delaney. We already have
supporters on
Patreon. We already have people supporting us.
They like us, Heather. They really
so
like
much.
us.
Thank you so much to Ashley Hubert, to Christine Fields, to Laura Mothershed, and to Amber Thayer DeMurchie. We really appreciate your support, and we look forward to more people joining you.
Heather, I look forward to recording more episodes with you soon.
Same here, Delaney. I will see you next time.
Bye, Heather.
Bye. Thanks for listening to this episode. You can support us on Patreon by looking for the Listen, Learn, Love podcast, or follow us on Facebook and Instagram at InPurposeES. That is InPurposeES. You can also follow us on Twitter at InPurposeEA, or visit our website at www.inpurposeea.com.
Heather, this was great. Do you want to do it again next week?
I sure do, Delaney.
Awesome. Talk to you then.
Bye.